what does great leadership look like at this moment in time? And so to explore this topic in a bit more detail, I am absolutely thrilled to kick off our first panel featuring Slack CEO Denise Dresser, former United CEO Oscar Munoz, and Sunshine CEO Marissa Mayer. Well, as I think about leadership, one of the most common conversations we have with our portfolio companies is how to navigate these uncertain times. And so I'm just so thrilled for this panel, in part because of the diverse experiences everyone has. From being an employee at a high-growth startup, public board experience, CEO. And so I'd love to dive into that journey to CEO. And what was your decision-making process when you became CEOs of Yahoo, United, and Slack? And as you think about it, looking back now, what was sort of the most compelling opportunity there? And maybe what were some of the challenges? And Marissa, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. So I was early at Google and was a software engineer. So I never really set out to be a CEO. I was a software engineer by training, loved to code. But I really do love thinking about the user experience, the customer experience, and building really compelling things. So moved into product management and started taking broader and broader roles across search and maps. And I started getting approached for CEO roles, but I have to say I overall probably felt like I didn't feel ready. I was also very happy at Google, loved the role, loved the company, loved what we did for people. And then in June of 2012, got approached by Yahoo. And obviously Yahoo at the time was a company that I really deeply respected. It was one that really helped Google get its start. It had been the king of the internet when my career started in 1999 and 2000, but it also gone through a lot of different struggles, a lot of different CEOs, turnover, a real decline. And at the time I was also 4.5 months pregnant. So it was a very involved decision in terms of, could I do this? Could I be a first-time CEO while becoming a first-time mom? All of the different pieces that go into that. But I think that what really drove me forward was I love learning. And I knew I had done search, maps, mail, social, all those things in the context of Google, but I had really grown up at Google and spent 13 years just in that context. And so a few years earlier, I started looking at public boards because I said, look, I have no desire to leave Google, but I want to see how other companies operate. And in 2012, I really did feel ready to say, okay, now I'm ready to see what I've learned at Google and see if I can apply it there. And so I really thought the opportunity to learn, I really say that being a CEO and leading a company is one of the richest design problems ever. Because you're designing products and businesses and teams and culture. So I loved that learning experience, but also Yahoo was a turnaround. And I don't think I necessarily even appreciate as a first-time CEO just how challenging it is. It's very easy to take growth and keep compounding it. It's also it's very easy to take declines and to keep compounding those. So we did manage to turn it and stabilize the business, not necessarily to restore it to the growth that we had hoped for. But overall, it was a great set of learning opportunities, and the challenges were really fun.
That's incredible. And Oscar, your journey at United was also super
interesting. It's funny. It's some similarities, right? I never set out to be a CEO. I just came from a background in my heritage where going to college was a big thing. Mm-hmm. And then you get into the workspace, and I was in the finance area, and part of our work ethic and our acumen and just general working with others leads you to a path where others recognize you and start giving you more elevated positions. Interestingly for me, as I was just about to be announced as CEO at the company I was at, a giant railroad company, CSX, which we had massive success, just as that was going to be announced, the board I was sitting on, Continental Airlines, or United Airlines, we had merged, came up and said, so would you consider this? And it was an interesting pick. I went from, I'm just happy to be doing all this stuff that I'm doing to, you have this one, and your concept of the compelling and challenging. And I think I speak to the audience and to the room here. The concept, they're kind of synonymous, right? It's like what makes it compelling is the fact that it's so challenging.
Yeah.
And very much like the turnaround at Yahoo, United was a mess. We had 8 CEOs in the previous 10 years. My first Wall Street Journal article was, what do you think of it? I was like, well, what do you think of the company? I said, well, what have you found? I said, disillusioned, disengaged, and disenfranchised. And that was our employee base. And so that challenging journey took a lot to work through. And so the journey was a long and winding road. I will say, and you guys are rock stars, that there's a concept of CEO and there's a concept of founder and CEO. That founder title, pretty badass. You guys should really be proud of that thing, because I've come in and fixed and rounded things, but the concept of what you've done is great. Equally, the role of CEO, and you outlined it very nicely, as you grow and you scale and you have humans that need you, that is a very different sort of perspective than just finding something and the acumen that it takes you to get there. This level of human leadership is a really important thing that I urge all of you, wherever you go and find it, is to go search that, because that is the meaningful difference between success and not success at a scale. I'll stop there because I could go. I wrote a book, by the way, all of that stuff.
But it sounds so much better when you say it.
Exactly.
We definitely will want to dive into that in a bit more detail, but maybe Denise, just your experience.
Yeah, I think there's some similarities to what both Marissa and Oscar said about wanting to always learn. And also, I'm really attracted to doing difficult things that I actually don't think I can do, because deep down I know I can do it, but I get sort of that adrenaline fix. I don't, jump out of airplanes, but I really love to put myself in a place where, gosh, I haven't done this before. I think it stretches your mind to grow. It stretches your humanity and your leadership. And you build relationships with people and learn about yourself and others in ways that you just can't. So I think we all probably share that, or else we wouldn't be here and in the roles we're in. But my journey was different because I started my career in finance. Neither one of my parents went to college. So for me also, going to college and actually becoming a CPA, like I had made it. I should have just been done and plateaued. But yet again, it's like you want to do more. And so I moved to California and learned about technology, and then found myself 20 years in two companies, Oracle and Salesforce, mostly in distribution roles, really learning that on many different dimensions. And I had so many great mentors at Salesforce and externally, and they all knew that I wanted to learn more. Specifically, I wanted to learn more about product and engineering. That was sort of the next area for me to round myself out. And that I really did want to be a CEO. I knew that about myself because of the challenge. And I happened to have a conversation with one of my best mentors, Brian Millham, who's the CEO of Salesforce. And I said in the meeting, I want to be the CEO of Slack. That's the job I want. It was not available. It shouldn't have even been a discussion point, because we had just put a new CEO in the role. But something deep inside me knew that that is the exact role I wanted, because when you think about bringing what is already an amazing product, but also bringing an additional distribution lens to that, bringing what is an amazing product-led growth company and bringing customer-led growth, and sort of being symbiotic in ways, in a place where I could try my hand as a first-time CEO, bringing a lot to the table and also learning, it was a perfect fix. And I think it's an example. The role wasn't available then, and then it subsequently became available. And so there was no decision for me. And, I was kind of like, I felt like I'd already been interviewing for it. And it was just a moment of, I think there's something to be said for putting your goals out there and shooting for the stars and knowing you can do it and staying with it. And that's really what happened in this role.
A quick moment, a proud moment of her. Denise and I first met. She was assigned, everybody's a friend of Mark. Everybody's a friend of Mark. And I'm doing something in San Francisco, and Mark's like, you got to come see the tower. You got to come see the tower. You got to have United stuff there. Yeah. So I said, all right. So the team, and we all walking over there. She was the executive assigned to tour me of the facilities.
Like,
and that's how we got to know each other.
Coming to the tower. Can you tour him in like an hour?
So great to see all this stuff.
It's so great.
Well, how was the tour? Was it incredible?
Denise was a great tour guide. How's that?
I mean, it was funny because you were very interested in the cultural manifestation we were using the tower for, and that was something very new for us as well. So it was fun to talk about that.
That's awesome. I think the other top of mind for a lot of CEOs and founders in the room is around AI. And how is AI impacting leadership today? And as you think about sort of digital transformation over your careers, how do these new and emerging technologies influence how you try to lead your teams? And Denise, maybe I want to start with you.
Well, I think I heard some really interesting stats that I think will ground what I'm about to say. The first one I heard yesterday was that babies born now will never be as smart as AI. And in ChatGPT, ChatGPT allowed you to do work that takes 5-second work transformed. And then it was 5 minutes for ChatGPT 4. And ChatGPT 5 is going to allow us to do 5 hours worth of work. So for me, the biggest thing about processing all of that is that this is unlike anything we have ever all seen before in our lives. Like, forget about it. It's bigger than the internet. It's bigger, and we don't actually know, and we're just in the beginning phases. And so I think for me, it is the utmost moment for all of us as leaders, number one, to be really making decisions faster and getting a comfort zone with making decisions faster, trusting your gut, having a good team around you and understanding, but being really willing to take some risks that you haven't done before, because I don't think we have a proper playbook for what we're experiencing right now. I think the other piece is really having a beginner's mind and just reimagining what the future is going to be like in every aspect, how you build product, how you build teams, as Marissa said, how you design your organization. And then I think the last piece is speed, and that's been a particular challenge for me. Now, I like to move fast. I'm from Boston, so anybody who we just move fast and break things sometimes, but really about being a new CEO and also being a leader from the humanities side, it's always a paradox. You want to build trust, but you have to move fast. And you have this constant tension, I think, right now between moving fast in ways that many are not comfortable and finding ways to build trust with your organization and go as fast as possible. And really seeking a lot of input as a leader and getting comfortable with speed. And we were talking about this at dinner last night. We have a leader, our CRO, who's amazing at Salesforce. He said something that we laughed at over the summer. He had just come back to Salesforce and he said, now is not the time to be tired. And we were kind of like, oh God, that's typical. He's a fast-paced guy. And I think that really has resonated with me. Now is just not the time to be tired. And you need teams and people that realize this is not just a sprint for a quarter. This is going to take longevity and speed at a pace and duration we have not seen. And so, I think about that every day in building a strength and a strong team, getting comfortable with speed, and being comfortable making decisions that you don't have all the answers to. And that's kind of what we all have to do, but it's at a different level.
I think that's a great point because especially with AI, every day there's a new development, new change, and it's easy to kind of just get exhausted and tired, but you just need to power through it.
Yeah, or ignore it, but we really cannot. It's really not a hype cycle.
Yeah, exactly.
There is some hype, but I don't think this is a hype cycle.
And Oscar, at United, the digital transformation there was absolutely incredible. And so we'd love to hear about how that influenced your leadership style.
It's just, so I represent certainly a different generation and a different kind of company, right? United is 100 years old. We've got 1,300 planes in the air every single minute of the day, somewhere across our 80 countries we fly and the almost 200 million people we fly. And the inherent systems technology sort of opportunity there was significant. So your question is, what does it mean for leadership? I think for certain groups, you just need to own it and embrace it first. And as a leader, because if you reject it, so will your organization. Mm-hmm. It is too hard to roll this stuff out. Mm-hmm. If you're like, I don't know if we should do it. Yeah. My advice, and advice sort of to all of you as you pitch your products, and understand that companies like mine have been around for a long time. They've been and seen and done everything, and the people that are there have done all of that. So you have to gently introduce them to some of these things. I'll tell stories all the time. Our app is the best in the airline industry, and I've talked to many of you who've come up to me and said that. And how did that come? Because we've been using what we didn't know was AI, certainly large language stuff, so all the things that have been around for a long time. We just didn't know what to call it. I called it personalization, which is the holy grail in our business. Because, increasingly nobody wants to. Remember, there was a time when you had to call someone who would then call someone else, who would then call the airline, who would then call everybody back so you could book your flight, right? And so now that process is just anathema to all of us. So the quick story is, in order to exemplify or lead by example, I am a naturally human connective kind of person. So when I traveled as CEO, I wanted to know who I was sitting next to. Like, can somebody give me this? So the first thing I got was this stack of paper of Marissa Mayer, Yahoo, and here's our contract with them and all that stuff. Had zero about the human connection. And I'd get that for 4 or 5 customers that I was sitting at. There's no way you can process that in the time you sit down. So it's like, well, we have this app we're building. What if we had a device that we could look at that could tell me who was there? And not just name, rank, and serial number, but I added something called, we call it the Oscar app. It's give me their last 5 flights on United and tell me how we did. And that created a maelstrom. Oh my God, it's like, no. Red, yellow, green. Like, listen, there are 5 flights. I look up, hey, I'm Marissa, I'm Oscar. Hey, I noticed that back in March 10th, you flew from New York to San Francisco. All I see a yellow or a red or a green. Usually I put it on yellow or red. It's like, I understand you had some issues. Tell me about them, right? Powerful human connection. You're blown away. It's like, okay, creepy that he knows my name. No. But the CEO of the company is asking about a fault that was possible. And oftentimes people were like, oh yeah, no, we were a little late, but it wasn't too bad. Or I learned something important. But that application, that example, we never called it AI. We never called it anything other than it's customer centricity. And you did it in a facilitative way that it didn't involve a whole lot of people. So that's the way. You have to embrace it, own it, and then exemplify it in some way as a leader.
And Marissa, you've had experiences at early stage startups that were hyper growth, large public companies where you managed hundreds, thousands of employees, and then startup CEO again. How has AI influenced your leadership? What has your leadership journey been throughout those cycles?
Sure. So for me, my fascination with AI started at Stanford. So actually, both of my degrees from Stanford in the mid-90s were both in AI. Because I remember at the time thinking, like, it would be incredible if we could actually create computers that are as smart as people or smarter than people. So I've been fascinated throughout. It's one of the things that actually led me to Google, because obviously taking that AI expertise and landing at Google in 1999, where search was the big AI problem of the day at the time. And so I love this AI moment because I feel like everyone's kind of waking up to the possibility of what computers can do, and I think it's going to be amazing. At Sunshine, what we've done, we almost named the company Mundane AI. And there's days when I actually kind of wish we had, because, well, I think there's a lot of companies, and I have so much respect for them, and probably many of them are in this room, really pushing the boundaries of AI, that cutting edge, that bleeding edge, global facial recognition, self-driving cars, maybe self-driving planes, right? Like, these types of things are really incredible. I also think that one of the opportunities we're missing is how do you take AI and apply it to your everyday life? And I think that that's one of the challenges as leaders. How do you have your people use it in their role every day? But at Sunshine, what we're doing is trying to build tools that take little pieces of AI and apply them in logical ways. So we started with contacts, almost like a CRM for consumers, because we wanted to build that human connection that Oscar's talking about. So we have a contact manager that does things like goes to your email, updates it. So if a person moves companies, you actually have their most up-to-date email, their most up-to-date phone number. You can actually keep track of them. Because the truth is, we know about 19% of contacts in your phone book at any given time are stale. And those people didn't mean to fall out of touch with you. You had their information. They would be happy for you to still have their information. It's just that contacts are static when they should really be dynamic. Showing you the last emails. Last week we launched photo sharing, which has all kinds of interesting things because yes, we can do global facial recognition, but what you really want is AI-curated photo sharing. At least that's what I want, where you don't have to look through the 7 pictures of your child, figuring out which one their eyes are open in, and figuring out that that's the one that should be shared. All of those types of things are things that AI can do, and I think by applying AI in those ways, it really demystifies it, makes it really useful for people, and ultimately really helps us start to build towards people really pervasively using these tools.
Sticking with AI for a second, what has maybe surprised you the most or challenged your expectations with degrees in AI? You've been following this journey. I'd love to get your thoughts on that.
So interestingly, at Stanford, there's a program called Symbolic Systems. And there's a bunch of industry leaders who are also symbolic systems, including Reid Hoffman, who was one of the people who originated the major. But what symbolic systems is it's cognitive psychology, how do people learn, philosophy, how do they reason, linguistics, how do they express themselves, and computer science. Can you make a computer that learns, reasons, and expresses itself? And I remember when I chose the major, I was like, ooh, like I love learning. I would love to know how people learn. So cognitive psychology was really compelling. Philosophy is really fun. And I was like, I'm not so sure about this linguistics piece. I remember taking intro to syntax, intro to semantics, being like, do I like this well enough to have this be part of my major? And I think that was interesting for those of us who've looked at AI for a long time, is for a long time, all the focus was on learning, building the models, and reasoning, actually deploying them. And I think that one of the things that really ignited imaginations with ChatGPT that surprised me was it's the expressiveness. It's actually the linguistics or the ability to draw and communicate what it's learned that really made it very, very tangible for people. So for me, one of the most interesting surprises was that it was the burst in that expressiveness in visuals and in linguistics that really caused AI to become just much more demonstrable for people.
Yeah, that captured the entire consumer mind share too. Everyone could start playing with it and using it, and then it's now seeing its way into business applications as well. I don't know, Oscar, Denise, any surprises you have seen from AI so far?
I'll be quick, just in order to time. But for me, the evolution of people understanding what AI actually means. There's the Bing Copilot thing, which answers questions in a demonstrative, sort of linguistically wonderful way, but it also says, I don't know a lot, right? And so the aspect of data and how important it is to feed those systems so that what comes out is actual intelligence, meaning something that reasons and gives you insight beyond what anybody can get, in stolen data. And so it's it surprised me how people don't understand the difference. And so that's kind of, I think, a lot of what everybody's working on and trying to get that real intelligence out there and the right data to feed it.
I don't know if this surprised me, but I was thinking about what you said, Marissa, in your major, which sounds perfect for the company Inflection with the application that Reed and Mustafa created. And I think I would just say that was the real moment. There was a moment in November 2022, I guess, when ChatGPT came out, and we all were forever changed. Like, I remember the first time I saw that and thought, oh my, this is incredible. But the other thing that surprised me is when you see an application like Pi from Inflection. Has anybody tried it? Well, it's probably not going to be around anyway, but the point is, for me, it was that combination of cognitive behavior, linguistics, data, philosophy, actually speaking to you personally. And it blew my mind, and it made me think about, this is actually where we're going. This is not science fiction. This is how work is going to be experienced. And I think that it is so far from where we even are today, even with the advancements we've made. And it really demonstrated for me how much faster we all have to go to embrace this, because this really demonstrated for me the future of what AI can be and the power of it and the goodness of it. I guess on the contrary, I'd say it's still surprising to me how many hallucinations happen and how far we really have to go with trust. But
Yeah,
that's,
there's still a gap there. Oscar, I want to come back to where you started, talking about becoming CEO. The challenge was the thing that excited you. You obviously had to make some really challenging leadership decisions. I'd love to walk through one of those and just how did you navigate that to drive a positive outcome?
Yeah. There's many of them, as we know, and leadership. It's kind of my book is filled with failures more than and how to avoid them to some degree. So there's several things, right? Large company, but probably the most difficult decision, which is the human side of things, is when, and all of you know about the famous video of a customer being beaten and dragged off by United Airlines plane. Now, the facts of the matter was, it wasn't United employees, it wasn't a United aircraft. We had all the right information that said, not us, it's somebody else, right? Chicago Police, United Express, all these different things. And so the initial response, again, back to this concept of tech. So the concept of Twitter at the time was out there, but the concept of being viral in a bad way, United is the first global viral negative thing that was out there. We've checked, there's no one else. That's me, that's globally infamous in 24 hours because our response was poor and we didn't think it was going anywhere. And so the tagline, I guess, that I always use, that it's never too late to do the right thing. So you quickly assessed what had happened, how badly we had responded for a host of reasons I won't share today, but mostly because it wasn't us, it was the thought. So getting ready to go Good Morning America, there's like 20 million people that are gonna watch, and everybody lives to see a CEO under the lights, like squirm, and of course they're expecting and they're ready for me to try to squirm my way out of it. And in fact, the prep the day before was exactly that. How do you explain in a way to people will comprehend and understand that it wasn't United and that your initial response was appropriate, all that kind of stuff. Middle of the night, I wake up, and I have my heritage. I grew up with my grandmother, who was one of the most wonderful human beings. And in this quiet moment of solace and looking up because there's nowhere else to look, as Lincoln said, it's like, I can't do this. I am not going to stand in front of 20 million people, in front of my own organization, this is the difficult decision, and try to explain, which in essence it's going to sound like, well, it wasn't us, it was them, and it was these people, right? And this video is now 800 million views on Weibo in China, for instance. There's no taking that back. So the decision there was rely on who I am, the latent dormant values of my grandmother and who she was, who would never blame anyone, right? Just never would. So I didn't know what I was going to say when I was asked the question, but I knew it wasn't going to be what I was prepped. The funny part about it, real quickly, is so what I said, they're like, oh, this, they make this big dramatic thing, and that turns the camera to you. And I said, you're right, it was horrific, and it's on my fault. I let the policies and procedures of running an operation like an airline get in the way of doing the right thing for another human being, and that should never happen. So that's a statement. It just came out of me, and why I can remember it today, because it was my statement, not someone else's. And importantly, this is the funny part. So her earbud is going off, right? Because they're all prepped, right? They're gonna, this guy's gotta start squirming and the follow-up questions.
Getting the PR ready.
And so it's like, wait, what did he just say? The funnier and louder gasp, and all of you can appreciate this certainly up here, your comms team and your legal team that's in the room in the background, he's not supposed to say that. We followed up with a quick plan. I took a lot of grief for that from both employees who were like, why did you not say the truth? Why did you kind of blame us and blame yourself? But what happened quickly, the news cycle died. We put things in place. And a lot of companies, and I get lots of calls to how to do this today, don't do that. And there's a particular aviation company right now that's struggling through that. And it's like, the truth, man, it will set you free.
Yeah.
Right? It is. And you'll remember it. This is, 9 years ago, but I can remember it vividly because the decision you as leaders that are going to have to do, if you haven't already done it, is do you go that way or do you go the way from your dormant, latent values that exhibit who you are as a human being? That's one of the most difficult things you can do.
That's incredible because that truth and transparency is so important with your customers, with your partners, your employees, but also with your board. And we have companies in the audience here from seed stage that are just forming their boards, all the way through to companies that are very late stage, about to go public. And Marissa and Oscar, just given your experience, both as public CEOs as well as public board members, would love to get your perspective on the best boards that you've worked on, the best board members, and what's worked really well.
Sure. I think that I could give lots of advice on boards and how to interact with them. One of my great mentors actually once told me that if your board is driving you crazy, it's because you aren't giving them enough to do. So that's one tip. But I think in terms of the best board members, I think one of the things I've sat on startup boards, I've sat on big public company boards, is having operators. It's easy as a startup, a company with venture investors, to have a board full of VCs, and it's appropriate because they're big owners of the company. But having an operator in there is really, really important. There was one startup I sat on where they shall remain nameless, but we actually got through a 3-hour board meeting. All the marketing initiatives, all the funding rounds, went into executive session, and my first question was, how was the quarter? And like everyone else there was like, did we really just get through a 3-hour board meeting without actually finding out what the state of the business is? And so my view is that operators are overall really helpful on boards. And they're also in the same role as you as CEO, and so they understand some of the challenges you're facing, and just in a much more visceral way because they've lived it. They've had to make some of those hard decisions. So I think that is really key. And then you also have to look for someone who's not just an operator, but someone who is an operator, but understands in your company they're not an operator. Because the other thing is like operators tend to like to do things, right? They're executives, they want to get things done, and so they give you advice, and then if you don't take it, or even if it's for a good reason, they'll be like, wait, like usually what I say and what I've decided happens, and now it's not happening in this situation. So I think that finding the right type of operators to put on your board is something that's really key, even at the early stages, where it tends to be more of a trend to have more investors.
I find that, especially in the startup world, a lot of people don't understand what that means, what a board means. And we have a venture fund, Latitude Ventures, and we did a webinar a year and a half ago, and we just had an hour-long conversation about asking the questions that all of you ask. And the gist of it is things like, you got to find the right balance of people. Friends and family are easy because they're friends and family. A total group of financial types is difficult because that's all they think about. And so how do you get a blend of that? And also know that whoever you pick is kind of forever. You just can't. Now, in private companies, you could probably do more changes, but I urge you to listen. Latitude Ventures, Laura, where's Laura? Raise your hand. If you want, you should look at it's a nice comprehensive process that we went through. The other thing with boards is, and you've seen this, I mean, recently retired CEOs sometimes are like the worst board members. Well, we all come from an environment where every time we walk in a room, right, well, you're looking good today. Oh, you sound great. Everything you say is funny, and right there. And so people bring that into a boardroom, and they want to be helpful. And so the dialogue and the dynamic inside of board and its culture needs to be where Marissa can call me out and say, hey, Oscar, love all your stories about United. They have nothing to do with what we're doing here. So, ask your question. Don't ask it in a 10-minute way where, well, when I was at United, we did this, this, and this. And I think that's a hard part of boards managing themselves. And you as a leader can help that by transparency. Just make sure people, and these 360-degree things, because boards can get really messy. I'm not going to name a favorite board just because I have many, and it always gets out that didn't pick them. It's like your kids, right? You never pick who your best kid is, although you do have one. Mine has blue in the background, one of the boards I like. So.
That's incredible advice. And maybe before we open it up to questions, Denise, maybe one last one for you. We talked about this morning, the importance of efficiency and productivity, and Slack is in the business of helping people do their best work.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for leaders in this room about how to make their employees as productive as possible?
I think every organization is different. Every organization has its own culture. I can speak about how we think about it at Slack and what I've also learned joining Slack. When I joined Slack, I also had this incredible feeling that Slack disrupted the way people worked for the good 10 years ago, and we just celebrated our 10th year anniversary. And again, I feel like we were made for this moment because work is never going to be disrupted more than ever than right now and ongoing. And so we think about that. We have an organization called Workforce Labs that really evaluates how people are working and where work is going. And what I think about within Slack and leading Slack is how can we be the best example of the future of leveraging technology and humanity to make work simple, pleasant, more productive, and a little bit more joyful. That's always been our ethos. When you use Slack, hopefully you feel that. But we really do have information overload. There's never been more ways to reach people than ever before. And so a big part of what we experience at Slack and feeling overwhelmed is what we're doing in the product. And so building ways for all of you who are customers and using Slack to actually quiet the noise, to use AI to summarize information, to predict the information you need, and really drive search and drive the best use of technology in one place as easy as possible so you can find everything, you can communicate and collaborate. So, we are looking for the biggest problems, the steepest part of the curve in working. And right now, for everybody, that's getting AI in the flow of work as quickly as possible. So we're doing a ton of that, and we're experimenting that as employees ourselves. We're thinking about ways to continue to challenge why we have a meeting when we could just be communicating, and really, really being focused about doing that and finding ways to drive async communication in Slack to make it even better. And so it's kind of a joy of a lifetime, to be honest with you, because the answer is you're never done. You're constantly looking and you're constantly pruning. And we get into these weeks where people are like, we're not going to have any meetings. It's focus week. And I'm like, okay, but that's also not realistic entirely. So I would say from a leadership perspective, it's leading from the top. It's also pruning all the time and using us as the best example to serve all of you and building a product that is incredible and hopefully continues to make life simple, pleasant, and more productive in this new age. And we find that fun every day. And so it's not just part of the leadership, it's just how we live and how we think and how we debate each other all the time to make it better.
I love the idea of async communication instead of a meeting, or maybe a Slack huddle instead of a...
Yeah, that's the story of Slack huddles. People are like, why don't you have a video conferencing platform? Well, there's probably a lot more we will do in integrating and thinking about that. But huddles was spun up because there's a real strong belief that you don't need to always be doing a video conference, but you might have that moment of impromptu communication, and we want to create that serendipity async. And I really love that theory. It doesn't mean we won't take it further. But it's just those little moments of thinking about working differently. And so if I had the code cracked, it would be easy. We all don't, and that's just the way life is. But I really believe that technology more than ever has an obligation, but also a privilege, and Slack particularly, to change the way we work again. And I'm very excited about that, and I know our employees are, and so it makes it fun and challenging.
That's amazing. Well, I'd love to open it up to the crowd for some questions for Denise, Oscar, and Marissa.
I'm Raghu. I'm co-founder for a company called Yellow.ai. This question is both for both of you. Joined United and Yahoo at challenging times, where you had seen high growth earlier and probably navigating some challenging times, and wanted to see what would be some of the mental models that worked or that proved to be valuable in navigating those times. Especially you have a great opportunity ahead, which is large markets, but probably there's some turbulent times in managing these companies. So love to learn something about that.
I think there were a lot of different things that I learned as I got to Yahoo. I think one of the things that was helpful in retrospect is someone said later, like, look, you arrived and you treated us like winners. And it was kind of interesting because when I arrived at Yahoo, like, everyone was so beaten down, right? Like, I remember, like, at the end, it was kind of crazy. They gave me these vouchers for lunch because lunch was heavily subsidized. It was like 75 or 80% subsidized, but you still had to pay for it. Which meant that everyone kind of left for lunch, and it was like not really a communal thing that brought people together. And I remember I had to like fill out this little check. So I got my salad, and it came to like $4.12. So I had to like write the check for $4.12 as I sat at the cafeteria at the check counter. And I was like, this is ridiculous. Like the company paid me more than $4 while I stood here and wrote this check,
Yes,
right? Okay, like, and so this is really insane. And so I remember I at the end of the second, I went and worked with the CFO, and they were like, well, like, it turns out like the food only costs like $7 million a year or something like that. And it was like, it's not even a penny a share. Because they're like, you already are paying for 3/4 of it. And so I was like, okay, we'll just make it free. And everyone was like, can we afford free food? Like, can we, do we deserve free food? And I was like, guys, like, there's losing money startups all over Silicon Valley that are doing free snacks and free food, right? Like, we're actually a profitable company with like $1 billion in EBITDA. Like, we can do this, right? Like, and so it was interesting because they just had this view of like, could they be treated like winners? And I also think that like, it was important to, one, acknowledge it was a hard problem. So when I got there, I said, look, a lot of you have been here for longer than I have. And if this was an easy problem, someone would have figured it out and done it a long time ago. So we're gonna need to put our best thinking here. And really getting people enrolled in that was really important. And also just getting out of the way. Same thing, the cafeteria is always such a wonderful place. So I was in the cafeteria, and I was like walking around, and this employee came over, tapped the front of my tray, and was like, is it go time? And like, I just come out of meetings where they'd been like, 25% of the company left between January 1st and June, right? So like, and I was like, it had been like attrition, meetings all morning in terms of like just the brain bleed that we were experiencing. And they were like, is it go time? And I was like, oh, please don't go. I've only been here for like 4 days. I was like, I really think we can do something great here. Like, just please stay. And they were like, no. They're like, is it go time? Like, a bunch of us have been sitting here, and we've got ideas, and we've got things we could do to make this place better, and we're just wondering, like, is it go time? Like, can management figure itself out, and can the board get out of the way so we can just go? And I was like, go, absolutely go. Like, I will get people out of the way. And so I think those are probably 3 important lessons. Treat them like winners.
I just got a quick
get people out of the way.
Very similar story. We had I found the 10 dumbest things we had done when I first entered. One of them was we had coffee machines on every floor. And as a cost-cutting measure, you would say, you took out the coffee machines. No, we took out the styrofoam cups that you can serve coffee on. And you're like, what the hell? I mean, it was $20,000 a year or something. So we put the cups back in. But to your question, your broader question, and not advice, you come up with axioms as you do all of these things. But I've always found that the concept of listen and learn before you lead. And it was, it's like, this place was broken, and everybody wants to know what you're doing first. Yep. And I'm on a call, with an earnings call, and everybody wants to know, okay, you're new, what are you going to do? And of course, that testosterone-laced financial environment, you're going to shut stuff down, you're going to cut people, right? They want to hear that. And my answer was, and this is back to kind of knowing yourself well, what needs to be done. I said, this concept of listen and learn. I said, I answered the question, I don't know yet. And you can watch the Bloomberg screen, like, boom, he doesn't know what is it? And it's like, and the concept of listening and learning. So I went on a listening tour throughout our 100,000 people organization, everywhere they work, at the times they worked, and just sat down with humans and asked them, what do you think is broken? From the 10 dumbest things to the things, and you got an incredible amount of information. And what I learned, not one specific thing, other than the fact that across all the conversations I had, and listening and learning to that before I started something, I learned that we had lost the trust of our employees, period. And so no strategic effort, no new equipment, technology, or planes was going to make a difference, because what you deal with every single day when you travel is another human being and your app. But so that's concept of listen and learn before you lead, because there was plenty of decisions that people would have made for me about shutting things down and rolling out all these things. But the fundamental thing that turned around United was the fact that the humans involved, 100,000 people, felt like they were part of that. How do you get your organization to follow that way? And a similar story, what you've done, go time. So
in the back, hi, my name is Mike Biersick. I'm the founder and CEO of Q-Control. I was really impressed by the anecdote that you shared, Oscar, I think as everybody was, about negative virality. And of course, your your commentary and your insights about leadership by transparency and accountability resonated personally. At the same time, in the last, say, 6 or 7 years, we've seen a rise of an alternate leadership strategy, which is based, without getting into politics, on
How do we all know what you're talking about immediately?
maybe on 4 planks of deflect, lie, obfuscate, and bully. And we've seen it work really, really well in the political sphere, but we've also seen it work really well in certain exceptionally large and successful companies. And I was curious if all of you could share your thoughts on how we collectively push back on the success of that alternate leadership strategy.
I think it's really quite hard, but I think that it just starts with being authentic to yourself, right? I think that if you're looking at these leadership styles and saying, like, look, what's effective, what should I emulate? I just don't think that's how you lead. I think that you've got to say, look, I've got to be true to my values, how I want to treat people, what I respond to, what I think motivates them. And I think it's really important to look inside as opposed to looking outside, because I just think that, some of these, we can all have our disappointment and judgment around some of these other leadership styles, but, in terms of your own leadership, it really is, was it authentic? Did it come from within? Is it something that you can live with and sleep with in terms of how you made those decisions and how you conducted yourself and how you treated people? And I think that that's probably the one thing I would take away from the question is it's dangerous to look for other people's leadership styles and the tactics that work. It's important to always be looking and learning, but at the same time, that kind of emulation is dangerous. And I also think that that's the best way to push back, which was, of course, your question, is leading in that authentic way, not based on emulation and what you're seeing work or not work, I think is probably the best way to push back.
I couldn't agree with that more. And just to put a real blunt point on it, or sharp point, there are books being written today by people who espouse certain things. And people read them and, we got to do the same thing. Mm-hmm. So I know all of you are really smart. Elon Musk is really, really smart. He can get away with stuff because of that aptitude and IQ is one thing. A lot of us do not have that. So what works for that person may or may not work for you. It's got to work for you, and that's that authentic self, because you trying to be someone else, but trust me, as someone who's been around life for a long time, that is the worst damn thing you're gonna do. You're gonna wear your ass out trying to be someone that everybody wants you to be. What you'll find later in life, when you are that authentic self, man, you rise, you shine, and the people feel your impact because they know that they can trust you, that the person they're seeing is the real human being, and that makes a big difference in all our relationships, whether it's a boss or a partner or a friend, and that authentic self, I think it's great advice, Marissa.
I think you said that well. The other thing I was thinking about on this is that the more intense the leadership role becomes, the more in touch with yourself and your gut and your moral compass you have to really be. And it's hard. You talked about your comms team, your legal team, people will freak you out, and all of a sudden you're like, who am I? And I had that experience as well. People wanted me to say things that weren't myself, and I think it's more important than ever to really understand who you are and be in touch with your moral compass. And then the other flip side of that is be okay that you're going to get something wrong. And I loved your story. We are all human beings. If we knew all the answers, we wouldn't need anybody else. We don't. And I think being willing to accept that for all the right reasons you made a decision or you missed something, that's just part of life. And I think we're all trying to figure this out, and being really empathetic and human can't be underestimated. And sometimes it sounds like motherhood and apple pie, but I would tell you that is probably the single biggest lesson I've learned in the last 5 months in stepping into this role, is having that deep moral compass and ability to steer yourself when no one else really knows you better. And you take it for granted when you're young. You just feel like you were raised right, you learned the right things, you always did the right thing. It really, in a lot of ways, comes back to that and building trust with people around you and spending the time listening and learning.
Trying to make people feel differently, or how can you be this divisive? It never works. People are set in their ways. Come up with phrases, and I've used one that I don't know where I learned it from, but it's all great civilizations first fall apart from within. And for me, that always, because I was like, oh shit, that's like, wow, that's really heavy.
Doomed.
But you think about all great civilizations from the Greek to the Roman Empire, right? What happened? We got fat, dumb, and happy, divided, greedy, right? All of the stuff that we're seeing in the divide in this country. Do not go gently into that good night. And all of you can help in your own ways by being yourself and leading your companies and your products in a way that really makes an impact, positive impact on humanity.
That's incredible. And as Oscar pointed out, it is unfortunately go time. But I do want to say a huge thank you, Denise, Oscar, Marissa, for sharing your invaluable experiences with our
Thank
portfolio.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good.